same time in July. We're not really seeing those high concentrations this year, although people on the ground at Brooks River have been reporting as many as 10 or 14 bears within their line of sight while they're standing on the viewing platform at Brooks Falls. But we're not really seeing the huge concentrations of bears that are that people come to expect from Brooks Falls in July. And why is that? Well, it's because of the sheer amount of salmon that are trying to move through Brooks River. The salmon run this year has been exceptional in the Naknek River watershed. And Brooks River is only a small part of that watershed itself. Let me find a map of the salmon migration route for you and bring that up, because I think that'll help to illustrate where these fish are coming from, maybe where they are where they want to go. Salmon are coming in this image following the white line. They're moving from Queechak Bay, part of Bristol Bay on the upper left, moving through Naknek River to Naknek Lake and into the Brooks River to Lake Brooks. Brooks River only receives about 20% of the overall salmon escapement for the Naknek River watershed. So the majority of the fish are going elsewhere. They're going into Iliac Arm, that light blue area. They're going into tributaries off of there. They're going into tributaries of other lakes farther upstream. They're going into swimming through Savanoski River into Lake Coville, Lake Grosvenor, spawning in American Creek and other headwater streams. But Brooks River, again, receives about 20% of the salmon escapement that enters Naknek River. And this year, that's an incredible amount of fish. It's probably 800,000 fish this year, since the escapement for Naknek River is over 4 million salmon. And that's a record. There's never been a run into Naknek River like there is this year. So we are really witnessing something special. And I think that's why the bears are looking so healthy right now, so fat for this time of the year, and so well fed. When bears have access to abundant food, they really are choosy about their meals. And this bear on the lip right now, perhaps number 907, is probably unlikely to eat the whole fish, just because there's so much food available to the bears that they can really be choosy. They can high grade the fish, like a miner looking for the high grade ore. They're looking for the fattiest parts of the fish, the most caloric parts of the fish. Places in the fish where fat are concentrated, especially like the brain, the skin, and the eggs, and they often leave the carcass behind. You can see, that the bear moving to the edge of the falls right now ate very little of that salmon. That younger bear near it, both of these bears showing quite a bit of tolerance for one another. The younger bear near it looked like it might have wanted to pick up some scraps, but maybe wasn't able to get to it before that salmon washed over the waterfall. If there were much fewer fish in the river right now, we would have probably seen that smaller bear run down the waterfall and try to pursue that salmon fillet. But it really does seem like the bears don't want to work very hard right now. We've even been seeing bears dropping a lot of their catches, catching one, sort of holding it for a second and then dropping it. Some people speculate that that's a behavior that allows them to choose whether they're eating a male or a female salmon. Salmon eggs are extremely rich in calories and very, very fatty parts of the fish, so it's worth a bear's while to eat those eggs. Of course, we don't know for sure whether they're selecting female salmon over males. We'd have, the runs start to trickle. We might see more bears concentrating at the waterfall, but this is also the time of the year when a lot of bears are going to start to disperse away from the river to fish in areas where they don't need to be around other bears as much, or they might try just other smaller streams where the salmon become accessible. Brooks River really is the first place in the region where salmon are available to these bears. But come August, there's going to be salmon spread throughout the watershed, and it's going to be very easy for the bears to find good fishing conditions elsewhere. but it's really in July. It's really concentrated at Brooks River. There's really not any equivalent opportunity for bears to find such ample fishing resources in the vicinity, except at Brooks Falls. Not a lot goes to waste at Brooks River. Salmon carcasses are cleaned up very quickly by scavenging bears, scavenging birds, other mammals. For instance, we were seeing a wolf at the beginning of July coming down, sometimes scavenging fish, often catching its own food. And the energy that salmon provide is not only important to bears, but for a variety of animals, dozens of animals throughout the ecosystem, and especially insects in the water and on land. When a bear drags a salmon carcass to shore, doesn't eat it all, that carcass is quickly colonized by flies. We often find, things like maggots revolting, but birds love them. So, we see there's a cascade effect, a ripple effect, a domino effect, whatever you want to call it, that happens when our bears are only eating part of the salmon. Bears are vectors that allow the distribution of the energy and the nutrients from salmon to be distributed throughout the ecosystem overall. And a lot of these partially eaten carcasses, they drift downstream, and they end up, again, feeding these bears that are not as skilled or able to compete for the fishing spots up at Brooks Falls. So again, like that subadult trio we were looking at before, I think a couple of them are still hanging out in the same place, just cleaning up salmon carcasses casually. Again, this is an opportunity that's open to them unintentionally by the bears only eating part of the fish upstream. And if you're just tuning into the broadcast, we're about halfway through right now. I'll be with you to the top of the hour, so for at least another 35 minutes or so. But my name is Mike Fitz. I'm the resident naturalist with Explore.org. I'm also a former park ranger at Katmai National Park in Alaska, so I'm familiar with the river and its bears. I'm not physically at the river right now, so I am enjoying sharing this experience with everybody remotely. And I'm grateful for Explore.org and Katmai National Park to give me this opportunity to share this experience with everybody. We did have I had a question that was submitted in advance through our Ask Your Bear Cam question form, and you can find a link to that in the featured comment below the live camera feed if you ever want to submit questions in advance. I do take a look at all the questions, even though there are too many for me to answer them all. I do take a look at all of them, and I try to get to as many as I can. But one of them that was submitted in advance was asked by Kathy, and she was wondering, is there a chance that all the salmon are arriving too early and there won't be enough salmon for bears in the month of August or September to help them fatten up on a sustained timetable as October approaches? And the run this year has been different in a few ways compared to what we've seen in past years. But I don't think there's going to be a shortage of fish later this year, and for a couple of reasons. One is that spawning activity in Brooks River really doesn't peak until September. And that's because the water temperature in Brooks River tends to be a little bit warmer than a lot of the headwater creeks found throughout the watershed. So salmon are good at judging water temperatures, knowing when the right time to spawn is. It's in their genes. They have an instinct to tell just when the right time to spawn might be. So salmon are going to be spawning heavily in September, and that's going to open up opportunities for bears to fish at that time of the year and gain the fat reserves that they need. That's really their final opportunity to gain fat reserves before they go into hibernation. But the overall abundance of fish probably isn't going to be a problem, just because there are so many fish in the watershed. And I've mentioned that several times before, but I don't think I can emphasize that enough, because this has been an exceptional year. And I'm bringing up a few graphs here. It might be a little hard for you to see on the screen. If you want to see these in a bigger format, go to the source for them. This comes from the alaskasalmonprogram.org. You can look for the Bristol Bay daily updates on that webpage. A lot of fascinating resources on this website. But take a look at that graph at upper left. That is the catch and escapement for the Naknek Queechak Fishing District in Bristol Bay this year. So that not only includes Naknek River, where Brooks River is part of, but also